everybody, to another day of the LPL over here on the LPL English Twitch channel. My name is Yanni. I am joined here by Quacks. Quacks, we got a couple of good matchups coming through. We're going back to Group Nirvana to kick things off with you and I, and LNG and OMG, and then later on, we're going to take our first dive into Perseverance with Bloxer and Slayer. But for now, LNG, OMG, a matchup between two teams that were very close in the Demacia Cup.
Yep, they played twice in a best of 3, and then that was narrowly, went to 3 games, 1 out by LNG, and then we went to game 5, like you said, in the first round of the third phase, Yanni, and once again, LNG being able to topple OMG yet again there. So OMG maybe a bit of a chip on their shoulder, having lost to LNG twice in Demacia Cup now, maybe wanting a little bit of revenge from that early tournament results that we saw. But now they have a clean slate to kind of prove it. Otta Can is now Otta Can't. The feats have been amputated, and the Blood Roses have withered away. We're in Season 16 now, which means that every team has to get a little bit more spicy with the strategies going forward.
And if you haven't watched the Demacia Cup, new season, new teams. Let's take a look at our first roster, LNG, because this team has gotten a bit of a facelift over the last couple of months. We've got Sheer, Croco, Bulldog, 1XN, and Missing, as this is just an entirely new look.
LNG just deciding to go full Scorched Earth from last year's roster, replacing everybody on the team, essentially. And I think going with a bunch of players who have a very common goal and had a very common story that was told in 2025, Yanni. A lot of these players, I think, calling their 2025 season a bit more on the disappointing end, at least in terms of results, and kind of wanting to get back in form, wanting to get some of those more prestigious results. I would say the only one exempt from this was 1XN, who is the player that we definitely have to be looking out for. I think he was one of the big joys for everyone who watched Nirvana. We're looking to get those stocks into cold hard cash. Those investors need their payout.
And speaking of 1XN, LNG, you can see pairing him up with Missing, a franchise cornerstone with JDG, looking for a bounce back year after being dropped at the end of Split 2. But one of the other new inclusions is Bulldog. And what is his destiny, Quacks? We've seen a lot of players come from the LCK over to the LPL over the years. Is he going to be a rookie, or is he going to be a chorus, or is he going to be something in between?
And it's really interesting because I think that this is a player, you know, we're kind of touching on wanting to improve from what you saw last year and wanting to make up for that disappointing 2025. And I do think that Bulldog is one of the players that really exemplifies that, right? Not only is he coming over from the LCK into the LPL, will he be a rookie, will he be a chorus, is definitely the big question. But also, he has been a part of the kind of the Freaks pipeline for several years. I mean, he started out as a Freak of Freaks academy player, moved up to their challengers roster. He was there until they came up to be the KDF, right? They were the Kwangdong Freaks for a little bit, and then most recently DNF in 2025. So he's been a part of not only Korea for his entire career, but a part of that entire organization for his whole career. So this is a really big change for him, and I do think that looking at how malleable this player is in this new environment is something we're going to have to look at as the split progresses.
A fresh start for a guy who would struggle at times over in the LCK. And, you know, not just Bulldog, but almost everybody else, they're looking for some sort of redemption here going into 2026, Quacks. As you can see, the only one, as mentioned, exempt from it is 1XN. That's why he's the Fiendish Codex. It's the best item in the build path here. For those who may not have paid close attention, the build path has actually changed compared to last year. But this is an effort to get these teams cobbled together, or this team, I should say, with all of these individual items to come together and make something great.
Yep, the road to redemption, the path, I should say, to redemption, because this is the build path to the item. And for those of you questioning who we put on certain items, I will say, I was in support of having Sheer be Glowing Moat and Missing be the Fairy Charm, because Fairy Charm is associated with the supports, right? That's like more of the support item.
Hear me out?
Okay, I'll hear you out.
Okay, so Glowing Moat, typically a memed item, right? Most
Correct.
useless item. But now with Jack of all trades, Glowing Moat, when you're on support, amazing item. So, we're trying to get, we had the missing in 2025. Now we're trying to get the missing in 2026.
I feel like we're going to have to take a recess on this court battle for the time being, because I feel like this could turn into a debate real fast. But in all honesty, I absolutely agree with basically every other placing. I do think that 1xn being the Fiendish Codex, obviously, like we said, this is a player who isn't necessarily looking for redemption like the rest of his teammates from 2025, but is rather looking to really prove himself on a team that is kind of beefed up from what he had in Thunder Talk. A lot of people want to see this guy have a bunch of these supporting pieces around him. And like you said earlier, Yanni, Missing really is that big guy. Not only has Missing, been a part of the league for a really long time, but this guy, when he joins a team, he commits. He's only been a part of 2 other organizations, essentially, in his entire career, that being WE and JDG, and he was on those organizations for 3 years, respectively. So I think that partially what I'm thinking about when LNG acquire someone like Missing is, okay, this guy's in it for the long run. He's willing to work with 1xn, reliably see building on themselves split after split, potentially year after year.
Let's go ahead and get into our next team. OMG is a team that has a couple of changes, but mostly the same faces. It's Harry, Juhan, Haichao, Starry, and Moham. Clearly, a couple of pillars here for OMG in the top and bottom lane with some new additions, a new battery in mid and jungle.
Yeah, Haichao and Juhan, the new additions here for the OMG roster. But I do think it is worth talking kind of about the mainstays, right? Because a lot of people, remember OMG from last year. Unfortunately, not able to finish out the entire year. They did get relegated to the LDL after that second split, so weren't even able to finish out 2025 in the LPL as an organization. And usually when you see organizations like that who really, hit that low point, you oftentimes see things synonymous with what LNG did this year, where it's just full scorched earth, burn it all down, and rebuild from the ground up. But they kept 3 of their players, and in particular, I do think that Starry is a guy who we saw at Demacia Cup. We saw him recently pilot those Misfortune games and have a lot of those really high KDAs. And I do think that these mainstays on OMG have really transformed over the year. And I'm curious to see how the new additions are really going to bounce off of these guys who have improved.
And that's why, unlike LNG, this rebuild is already in progress. They got their hard hats on. They're ready to work. And Starry and Moham are going to have to work today. One of the matchups you wanted to highlight was this bot lane, right? 1xn and Missing. 1xn, after the year he had last year where he looked good on a bad team, and Missing, a player who has been renowned for a while, who had a rough 2025, they're still going to be a very, very tough test for these 2 guys to go up against. It should be a very, very interesting matchup to watch. One of our other new additions has apparently been flying around everywhere, Quacks, because Mr. Worldwide is here and ready to play. Juhan joining his 4th region. You see everything stamped, passport ready to go. No problems.
Yeah, and Juhan's journey, I think a lot of people, when they think about this player, they think about the Maokai skin, they think about him being on that DRX squad, but it's been a pretty tumultuous road for him ever since 2022, when him and that organization were able to lift the trophy in North America all those years ago, because immediately afterwards, he went on to be a part of DRX and was their mainstay that year, and subsequently after, that kind of got difficult. He was also on that team with Krako, by the way, LNG's jungler, so a little bit of a shared time now being able to face off against one another after all of these years. But even after that, he went to EU, he started playing for Giant X, and then kind of was starting up with them, and then went to their academy team. So it's been a very up and down road for this guy. After that, he went back to DRX Challengers and was in tier 2. So he is back now in tier 1, but in the LPL, and like you said, Mans is going all over the place, Yanni.
He's been flying out everywhere. You can see this nice little intro we have for all of our players. I think this is super, super sick. I loved that initial video, the hype video they had
Yeah.
featuring all the players. And now I love that they have their more grand introductions this time around. It feels so much cooler than last year's. I only saw one player walk out for LNG for a second. I was like, the only one I saw was missing. As you can see the players going do the traditional fist bump. Looks like our mid laners may be a little bit confused, but that's okay. They got it done anyway.
1XM, I think, fist bumped Moham. So somewhere along the line, we messed up, but it's okay. I don't know who the culprit was. But that is pretty funny that Missing was there for a second. Ironic, his name being Missing, he's the only guy that shows up for a second there. But in all honesty, yeah, these walkouts are super duper cool. Also, I know that we saw a post about it on Twitter, but I just gotta say, like, 90% of the jerseys this year in LPL, Yanni, are absolute heat. I feel like every team absolutely nailed it. And as someone who enjoys the merchandise of League of Legends, but I try to limit myself to maybe like one or two, it's going to be pretty difficult for me to do this time around.
Limiting yourself to one or two, you're the problem with esports, brother.
Whoa,
you know,
man.
In terms of
it's
a lot
hard
of the jerseys,
living in this economy, man.
In terms of a lot of the jerseys, I think there were a couple downgrades, but I think there were a lot of upgrades. I have to say, OMGs, I'm whelmed by it. LNGs looks fine. It's nice, appealing color, but it doesn't have any glitz or glam to it really, which is fine. You know, it doesn't need to be super in your face. I like the lettering on it. It looks pretty solid, but other than that, this is not a jersey war that I'm like, I'm in.
I'm in for the jersey war though. So I'll be picking my side sooner or later. Stay tuned for that. But
you've had a good look at them. Come on now.
Well, all right. I mean, I'll put my vote with you with the LNG simply because the OMG color has always kind of peeved me a little bit.
The creamsicle.
The creamsicle, yeah. I wasn't a big fan of that flavor of ice cream, and I'm not a really big fan of the color in general. But kind of going back to the teams for a little bit, I do think that, you know, talking about the bot lane, this is something that we are going to be focusing on, but also, Yanni, the mid laners of both of these teams, and we did talk about Bulldog, will he be a Karus, will he be a rookie, but Haichao as well, I think is a player who we absolutely have to talk about as someone who we are really keeping our eyes on for OMG. We talk about the mainstays, but Haichao is a player, you know, obviously a lot of people will talk about his really, really disappointing 2025 and how he's able to, you know, have that upwards motion going into 2026. But so far, I feel like we've seen kind of a different side of this guy. I think he's been more willing to fight. I think that his team fights have particularly been a lot better. When I saw him in Demacia Cup, I was really impressed by his ability to initiate fights through picks and, you know, his team being able to follow up on all of that. So I do think when we're looking at these teams who, you know, have rebuilds or are reconstructing their roster, coming up with what they want to, you know, go forward with potentially in this entire year, potentially even beyond that, it is important to be looking at the seeds that are planted and what exactly the identity is being carved out by these squads.
I'm with you there, Quacks, and especially because OMG brought him in, right? They determined that Haichao is different than what everybody has said, that he is good and they can grow with him and he can grow with the team and really put something great together. I think this is a good early test, especially because, you know, he had a great Demacia Cup, I'd say, and really, really good performances there. But regular season is very different than Demacia Cup.
Yeah.
It's a whole new season since Demacia Cup, right? We've got a lot of changes, but still a lot of the same champions. And if that's the case, I do worry for Haichao a little bit, because while he did have some good performances on champions like Talia and Ari, he had some rough performances on champions like Azir and Aurora. And I think in order to be a top flight mid laner, you have to have a good Azir.
And obviously, with a new landscape for the new season and all of the changes are still being adjusted to, when all of that is still taking place, it's really kind of interesting to see how mid laners individually adapt here. And I do think that Haichao is a player who, we're used to him going on your more traditional mages. We don't really see him go outside the box for some of those more scrappy melee mids. He doesn't do anything like akin to a Saber where he's, willing to go like the Echo or the Tryndamere. He's very traditional with his champions. And so I do think that with a higher octane game that everyone has been talking about, how that will affect his ability to scale, collect side lane waves, and generate gold for himself to be ahead going into those mid to late game team fights. Because I absolutely, like I said, think that that was his biggest strength in Demacia Cup.
Now, speaking of some of the changes that have been made, Quacks is one of the resident high elo players that we have, or at least Apex tier players. Master tier Kha'Zix one trick. Gotta shout you out. What have you experienced so far through this season?
What have I experienced? Well, if you enjoy Kha'Zix, Umbral is really broken. They didn't give us Duskblade, not the Invis version. We still miss it, but this is like a good enough compromise, in my opinion. No, in all honesty, I think that one thing I am definitely going to be keeping my eyes out for is, the lanes, obviously, top lane in particular, getting a lot more XP. I do think that this has become a much more volatile lane. We haven't had a lot of time to talk about the top laners, but I think Sheer is a player that will absolutely thrive in a meta like this, where laning phase matters a whole lot more. And I think a lot of people, when they think about Sheer, they kind of go back to his time on JDG when he was a rookie and dominating everybody on Jax. He was scrapping with everyone, willing to take all of these trades and willing to fight at every single opportunity. This kind of feels like if he wants to go Jax, if he wants to go Rumble, if he wants to go Ambessa, he can do that. And if he finds angles to get ahead in the laning phase, boom, 2 levels up over his counterpart and can dominate and snowball the game from there. And already we're seeing how much importance those top laners are being paid, with both Rumble and Ambessa being banned in the first phase.
Yeah, going to be a little bit harder for Sheer. And for those who may not have watched since the changes have come through this year for at least LoL Esports, remember the decoupling of first pick and side selection. OMG is going to be on the blue side. LNG is going to have first pick, and they're going to come through here with this Orianna, which has really just been the stock standard safe first pick for a long time, because even if you respond with an Akali, you just built defensive.
I do love this. I did say that Haichao is not a mid laner who traditionally goes outside the box when it comes to the more aggressive mids, and he immediately is going to have a change of style here from what we expect from him, locking in that Akali. And Starry going to get his hands on the Aphelios. Now I think OMG's biggest objective, whenever you have a champion like Aphelios, you need to be thinking about, okay, our ADC is immobile. He doesn't have any escape tools if he gets caught out by a shockwave. So creating space between him and the enemy team has to be priority number one. I think of junglers like Jarvan. I think of supports like Bard. Anything that can keep the enemy team away from Aphelios and allow him to leverage that range goes super well with this champion.
And I love that OMG's first game of the season, they're giving Starry this Aphelios, which, as mentioned, has been rising in popularity across all leagues, even in solo queue, but it's also one of his best champions. So we'll have to see what goes around this OMG squad, because already having to stare down a Renekton and a Jarvan is going to be very, very difficult for Starry. We see the Malphite getting locked in here for OMG.
I like this. I think that Jarvan and Renekton are pretty front-loaded as far as damage goes, at least for the first phase of the game, until Jarvan can, get some ability haste under his belt and really just start spamming EQs. He is really reliant on hitting just that initial EQ-R combo to dish out as much damage as possible, and Malphite can tank that up. He is the rock in the jungle at the current moment. That's where he is most popular, and that's where we're expecting him to be played, though. I will not rule out the possibility of a flex. We could always see something like that. I like this, though. I think that, like we said, it creates space for the Aphelios, and most importantly, it's just good into the front-loaded top jungle duo that LNG have drafted here in the first half of Game 1.
We can see Thresh getting banned away, so one of the escape tools for Aphelios going to go by the wayside, which that's really the best escape tool that you have into a Jarvan, Renekton, Orianna. So I do think this is going to be increasingly difficult. You said we're going to need some zone control out of OMG to allow room for Starry to breathe. Quacks, what are you thinking are going to be the pickups for OMG?
I mean, I wouldn't hate something like a Rakan here. I mean, you could do like Braum or Alistar. I think that those would probably be like the traditional supports that I would think of when it comes to both being able to peel off for your ADC, get that space with things like the Pulverize, just knocking away a lot of these backline threats. Looking at LNG, you're going to have more than one backline threat to deal with. So I do think that you're going to have to think a little bit more outside the box. I do think that Alistar might not be the best solution at the current moment. So I do think it just needs to be one of these tankier champions with that, innate peel for your AD carry. As LNG, they're just going to keep stacking these engaged champions. And yeah, denying that Bard, we talked about Bard's ability to, with that Tempered Fate, buy that space for Aphelios. This is as much of a good pick and good pairing with Yunara as it is a denial to allow Aphelios to make that space.
And not only that, it would, be difficult for Aphelios to deal with on top of it. We'll see if that's the option, though, because there are a lot of good enchanters, and they are going to go with that Lulu to pair up with the Yunara and allow the crazy late game scaling. And that's what you're going to need, especially given the fact that you've got 3 physical damage dealers staring down a Cassante, staring down a Malphite, potentially an Alistar too. It's going to be difficult to cut through this OMG team.
So it is going to be the Alistar lock in here for OMG, and I did warn against this. While it is a good pick and, does the job of peeling off these backline threats for your Aphelios, that can only hit one dude. You can only peel off one guy. And so I do think that when you've got multiple backline threats here on the LNG comp, particularly with this top side, it can be very, very dangerous if they're able to stack those engages efficiently. And especially Sheer, if he's able to find a teleport into these plays, Krako's coming in from one side, Sheer is coming in from the other side. If you get sandwiched as Starry, it's lights out. So I do think that positioning for these team fights, particularly for this Renekton, is going to be something I am on the lookout for when it comes to these late game team fights, because late game seems to be, Yanni, what both of these teams are setting themselves up for. These are both very stock standard front to back comps. I think the only X factor for this game is going to be Haichao on that Akali. I think that's probably where we'll see the most early game action and maybe just the most amount of flexibility when it comes to pushing the power in favor of OMG to maybe snowball this game instead of solely relying on the team fights.
I'll say this, I think LNG has plenty of ability to snowball this game with early game Renekton, with Jarvan being able to move around everywhere. You have a lot of early strength there that if you can set OMG behind, it's going to be so difficult for them to get in the game because of the fact that you've got your late game Aphelios, and if you shut down an Akali early, she's going to have a hard time actually killing some of these targets. I want to look at the mid jungle duo for the side of OMG to see them set things up level 6 onward. We're getting on to Summoner's Rift for game 1 of this best of 3 series between LNG and OMG. Let's do it.
We can see nobody too aggressive at the current moment. Minions spawn a lot quicker. We get into League of Legends a lot sooner, and that just means less time to actually look for these deep wards. You can see, though, both teams get a little bit of vision on each team's respective raptors, so they should have an inkling of information as to where these two junglers are starting, at least for their full clear.
Tough lane to play out if you're Moham, but Starry doing a good enough job with that Calibrum to just poke 1xN and missing for the moment. But really a lot of this early game is going to be going through Krako. This guy really can get this team going and started and make this a very difficult game for OMG to get through.
And if it does come down to a 3v3 fight, I mean, Malphite is very much known in the same vein as champions like a Nocturne, right? You get level 6, that's your whole bread and butter, that's what you do, that is the one tool that you use to start team fights, that's just the magical button. Meanwhile, though, Jarvan has, like you said, Yanni, a little bit more agency, at least in the damage department compared to Malphite, to actually make stuff happen and to actually win out in some of these 3v3s. So even though champions like Yunara are a little bit weaker on the earlier phases, I would favor LNG in a straight-up scrap, and that's why I think once we see this Malphite finish his full clear, he's probably just going to go up toward that top side crab and maybe can look to interfere with that 1v1 lane.
Likely. You know, the pre-6 Malphite gank is not exactly one to be feared. So he was already spotted out a moment ago by the side of LNG, and I'm sure LNG is like, oh yeah, that's fine, man. You know, we know where he's at. We're not overly concerned. You can see Haichao a little bit down in the HP department as Kroko getting a ward down as soon as the OMG bot lane does so, and it'll just be... no, he'll go up to that top grab, it looks... No, he'll get the ward. Okay. I thought he was gonna go walk up there and try to confront Juhan.
I think the idea is that I believe that ward will still be up by the time Raptors respawn. So Juhan is more than likely going to take this crab, recall, look to go back toward that part of the map. And then if he does look for something in the mid lane, it will be spotted out by that ward. So just covering his bases, allowing for Bulldog to be a bit more aggressive in this lane. As you can see, he's just been bullying Haichao ever since the game started. It's been making it really difficult for this Akali to walk up without trading HP in return.
Yeah, at least for the moment, it's not the worst thing in the world. You know, your 3 lanes are not winning, but Juhan is yet to be disrupted, right? And if he's allowed to get to level 6 without a problem, that's when things can start turning over for OMG. We'll try to take a look at that over the next couple of minutes. I want to wait till his solo laners are 6-2, and then, you know, I want to see Juhan and Haichao just target out Bulldog.
Yeah, and Bulldog is really laying the hurt. I mean, Haichao at this point... You know, we do have the home guard changes, but you still are going to be missing CS. We also have the plate changes. If you do surrender this tower to the waiting arms of Bulldog, that's going to be gold into the coffers of Orianna. So he's just trying his best to stretch this HP bar out as much as possible without giving anything over to his counterpart in return. And that's just going to mean more prio for LNG. We can see that Kroko is now moved toward the bot side and can maybe start to go for these more aggressive avenues as far as at least the warding department goes to spot out what Juhan is doing.
Sorry, I'm wisely going to back off after getting the shove in there, knowing that Kroko is on the bottom side missing. Going to walk up and say, hey, you're not allowed to recall for free. As it interrupts the recall of Starry, which is very relevant at this point in time, considering they don't have any items yet.
No wards either for the side of LNG. I mean, Juhan is just wrapping around here. He doesn't have 6 though, and do we fear the pre-6 Malphite, Yanni?
Well, maybe you should, but again, Starry getting canceled. Oh, this is just very difficult for this OMG bot lane now with this wave coming in. I don't know, man.
Yeah.
Juhan had to move all the way up, and that means that Dragon is going to go over to LNG unless Juhan has something to say about it, and I highly doubt it.
I mean, I don't think Juhan really has any right to be here. He doesn't have level 6 yet. He doesn't have prio from his bot lane. Haichao sacrificed a little bit of his health. I like that Bulldog basically expels him from being able to join into any of these fights and just continues to declare that he's the one in control of this lane. Now this Akali is going to have to keep putting up with this just unrelenting poke from the Orianna, and that's going to make it really difficult for Juhan to get a ton of stuff down on the map. Even if you do land a successful unstoppable force, there's no guarantee that Haichao, you know, if he goes in onto the Orianna, is going to be able to execute on that kill without potentially getting 1-for-1 at worst.
I think you take the 1-for-1 even then, right? Just because you have a champion that can try to assassinate a couple of targets compared to
You're
a champion
with an alternator item, right?
Yeah,
like
exactly. And Orianna's building more defensive. You can see, you know, we've got the catalyst there, so that's what I'm looking for. Juhan now has that ultimate. We'll have to see what happens next. Good polymorph there to make sure that Moham couldn't get the knock up, just the knock back. Well timed.
Yep. Missing gets you know, he gets saved a little bit from the incoming barrage of damage that Starry wants to be putting out into the lane, and that's something he hasn't really been able to do. I mean, you pick this Alistar. Like we said, we're really looking at this pick to be effective in the team fights, to give space over to the Aphelios, who is immobile, but at the same time, it feels like we're just seeing patterns like this where Moham is, without his ultimate, traditionally taking a beating, and he's not able to, you know, take a lot of this damage from the Yunara for very long, so that just results in it being really difficult for Starry to get a lot of these resources that are desperately needed for a champion like Aphelios.
Both junglers hovering around the bottom side here as we're going to see a knock-up onto missing. Kroko is here. Knock-up goes back on the Moham. He's level 5 and he gets cataclysed. He's down, but here comes Starry. He's got red-white, and it's time to fight. But 1xN has transcended himself, and Juhan's got to run for the hills. He'll flash the wall, but Kroko is there to follow, and it's a huge win for LNG.
And Kroko, just with the flag and drag precision in that fight. Juhan wanted to go for an engage onto the backline, but his backline wasn't able to follow up because they were in trouble from the Jarvan. It just comes down to damage. Like we said, the Jarvan has more of that in the early game, and that was the relevant factor in this 3v3. The flag and drag goes in, and I mean, yeah, Starry, he gets a return kill, but he had to expend a ton of time in order to do that. They go super deep into enemy territory at this point, and Kroko just does so much damage on this early game Jarvan. This is what the champion is best at, applying that early game pressure, like you said, Yanni.
And, you know, you saw 1xN's flash there was fantastic.
Yeah.
A reposition to avoid the ultimate, but also stay in the fight. And now looking at Jarvan damage, he's got that Sundered Sky. It's going to be very, very difficult to actually kill this guy with the lack of damage that OMG has, because their carries aren't quite there yet, Quacks. We did see one grub getting taken here by Kroko, but he's left the other two up for the moment.
I think that's a good idea, particularly because you're kind of on a timer to make stuff happen now. Starry no flash, Juhan no flash. These are immobile champions that need to get flagged and dragged, and Kroko, you can see he's just spending time getting toward the bot lane, putting pressure where it needs to be applied.
And Juhan probably thought he was on the top side. He has to ult out to avoid the onslaught of LNG, but they are in hot pursuit. They really want to kill him.
I love this.
Kroko lands the knock-up, and Juhan will crumble.
Kroko is just relentless. I can imagine in the comms he's saying, go in, go in. I got flag and drag in a couple of seconds, and Juhan is going to have to spend a few more seconds back to the base. Now Starry is super low. Cataclysm's back up.
Knockup is there. Kroko's under the turret, but he'll cataclysm
Ooh.
out, but still full. Starry picking up a huge shutdown.
Yeah, Moham really well executed there to basically spoon feed his ADC a free kill. Kroko just going a little too aggressive there, gets punished for it by the OMG support, and when the dust settles, it's a 1-for-1. Starry, like you said, desperately needing that kill, and it does, for the most part, at least give some more resources over to this Aphelios. This is the win con for OMG, and he does have 2 kills, Yanni.
Yeah, and this is his one of his best champions, I should say. He's got a mean Xayah, but for the moment, this Aphelios is the pick. It's going to be a difficult pick to play out a little bit later, but he made it look fairly easy there. He's going to have his flash hopefully up for the fight after this dragon, as this dragon's coming up in 3 seconds, and I'd imagine that OMG maybe don't want a piece of that one just yet, but no team is really well positioned for it. LNG just going down and getting some wards, and it looks like they'll be the ones to start this one up.
Particularly because Juhan goes for the Zeeks and Moham doesn't have the ultimate on the Alistar. It means that there really isn't a reliable front line here for OMG. Even if they do go in, there's no guarantee they're getting out. So it does feel like kind of a flip play to go for this dragon, but it's the LPL, baby. We love those.
Well, we're going right in onto Kroko, who secures the dragon.
Ooh, high
Potential turn onto High Chow as Juhan gets shoved away and taken down once again. 1xN is doing the most right now. Meanwhile, our top laners are fighting. Stun went down onto Harry. His shield will slice and dice his way out. But it's another kill in the ledger of LNG.
Yeah, Juhan really wanting to fight for that dragon, but OMG were just not in a position. They didn't set up around that bot side river. They came in super late, and most importantly, Yanni, they were divided. Starry and Moham were on the bot side. They were disconnected from their mid jungle, and LNG, they pick a direction to go into. They get right onto Juhan, who goes into them. And it's just an easy kill on top of the second dragon of the game, so they're keeping that stacking alive. And this is super important because, as we've illustrated, this is going to be a game where team fights really are going to be kind of plentiful as the game goes on, and the laning assignments get a little bit more muddled and blurry.
OMG really need to tighten their belts this game, Quacks, because if you continue to just bleed kills over to 1xN of all players, then what's the point of even having this Aphelios? Because you're just going to get matched in the late game, or, you know, better yet, Yunara's going to get to late game before you. That's going to be a huge problem. That's what I'm looking for over these next couple of objectives. I know it's tough to willingly say we are giving up objectives, but I want to see OMG show that restraint and maybe go for players that are not quite as grouped up on LNG and try to get one pick while giving up an objective.
I also think that it's just really difficult to go for some of these early to mid game fights because your early to mid game damage is mostly reliant on Haichao. And this Akali has been completely jailed in the mid lane. We have seen very little support from Juhan to try and free up the Sakali to actually be a threat on the side lanes and start to put pressure potentially onto 1xM with this Yunara, who you put it pretty perfectly, Yanni, is basically able to just free scale on this champion, match Aphelios in that department. And so it's just creating this big threat for LNG. They've got the early game pressure with the Jarvan, but that bridge is going to be built perfectly for this Yunara to start taking over.
Yeah, and OMG had to build a similar bridge, but they forgot all their supports. I have to get my dad to come through and tell them how to make the bridge good. My dad's bridge painter, you know, he understands good things about bridges. But yeah, the Haichao just is there.
I
this
failed
game.
that assignment.
Hasn't gotten any assistance to try and carry this game. And I fear, Quacks, it might be a little too late for that to happen because Bulldogs finished that Rod of Ages. It's not yet fully stacked, but who are you going to kill now?
Yeah, there are a lot of health stackers on the side of LNG, so that burst from Haichao, that's a good point, really isn't in the cards at this point. Really, the only person you can one-shot is 1xN, and good luck getting to him. That's all I gotta say. But going back to your bridge metaphor, that gave me like PTSD. I had a class, I forget what it was called, but it was in middle school. We had to build bridges out of toothpicks to see if it could hold like rocks and stuff like that. I think I was like the last kid in the class to be able to do that. So I don't know a lot about building bridges and
are you building any bridges in the near
Maybe
future?
LNG can teach me a thing or two.
Okay, because you gotta let me know so I can avoid this bridge. One bridge that is not going to be avoided is this Rift Herald to try to bridge you into the later mid-game. It is spawned LNG. Their bot lane is the first to get to mid lane and shove this one in, and it looks like everybody's going to converge on this objective in just a few moments.
We can see the teleport coming out from Haichao to try and match Bulldog, but like you said, story with the mid lane where LNG are just a few seconds quicker. They're a few seconds quicker on the top side as well, and so Bulldog, with that range advantage, should be able to just shove this wave in. LNG can keep control of this top side river, and I'm wondering if they're actually going to pull the trigger on this Herald, because it is in maybe the cards for OMG to look for a cross map if they want to, but they're really over-investing on this top side. I don't know about this, Yanni. If this doesn't end up bearing fruit, I don't feel like you're going to be able to do much.
Yeah, Haichao's just in no man's land. Nobody's around to help him, and the mid laner of OMG falls.
Juhan.
Juhan is like, hey guys, I was hiding, and he's going to have to unstoppable force away.
Yeah, there's no, we want to say I was hiding in Twitch's voice, but unfortunately we're saying it in a really dejected, uninspired voice, as Juhan, for I think like the third time this game, is going to be forced to unstoppable force out of the fight instead of into the fight, and LNG just continuing to have a stranglehold here in game number 1. They take control of top and mid. They get a pick onto Haichao. Herald's secured, and now this is a free gateway into Soul Point. You put this in a lane, you pull pressure from OMG, and they're not going to be able to respond, or at the very least, we're going to see a repeat of that top lane play where you're too late onto the draw. LNG have already set up, and they can just pick you off on top of getting the objective.
Now we have over 1,000 gold lead. Oh, hang on. 1XN is going to chase down Starry. Moham shows up and says, hey, stop going after my carry. But, I mean, look at the large gaps in gold we have here. I mean, LNG is up 5,000 gold in 17 minutes, and I don't think they've done anything particularly groundbreaking. They've fought fairly well. They've been around objectives. They've been there first. And it just feels like OMG has said, we'll fight for anything. Yeah. 1XN fighting for control of that midway, forced to flash away, drops his ultimate, but will fall. Story ties on the back end, so it's a 1-for-1 trade of AD carries.
Yep, but I still think that favors LNG. You can see that this does not deter Krako in the slightest. He is still on that bot side river. He is still going to be starting up that dragon. I think the big thing I'm looking at, though, are those top laners, those teleports. The quests have all been completed, so I wonder if those are active for either of them. It's active for both of them, so if we do go into a scrap, Renekton and Cassante would be present. But for the first time this game, Yanni, we're not fighting for an objective. We are actually, as OMG, willing to give one up, and I feel like it might be too little too late to come to that decision.
Well, you just lost your AD carry, so I think that's why you couldn't go fight for that objective. Let's take a look at this again, Quacks. They give everything to get 1XN here.
And I think Missing, had he just timed the wild growth a couple of seconds sooner, it would have interrupted the R1 on Haichao, and maybe, it's a very loose maybe, but maybe 1XN gets out there. Still though, I think a 1-for-1 does favor OMG, just given how behind they are, but it still gives resources over to the Yunara, who continues to scale and is getting very close to 3 items, Yanni.
Rift Herald popped in the mid lane as LNG are looking to take out yet another turret. It'll be the last outer turret going down as they have really broken open the gold lead over the last couple of minutes. An extra 1,500 to top it up to 6.5 as we're going on a ride.
Yep. We're going to crash into the wall, but this is just going to be putting the Herald on the bot side of the map. And now LNG, they got an express ride to take over this part of the map, and Juhan, unfortunately, doesn't have his ticket.
Moham coming around the side, spotting out 1XN. Red buff secured for the side of OMG, which is really all they can do at this point, Quacks. They are so far behind. We've got Soul coming up in about 3 minutes. Baron over the next 10 seconds. I'd imagine if there's one fight that LNG could win, maybe they get a pick or two. Baron will be on the menu next.
Honestly, even if they just expel the, or expend rather, the unstoppable force out of Juhan, even if this Malphite lives, as long as he's using that ultimate defensively and they can force that out of the OMG jungler, I feel like that just might be a ticket for LNG to be starting up this Baron, because then OMG have to essentially walk into melee range in order to fight and get LNG off of that part of the map, and that is just not something they can do at this point in the game when they're 3 dragons down, 6,500 gold down, when you are in this dire need of some kind of win, and you're not getting it, and you're forced to essentially go face-to-face with the team that has been dominating this match. I feel like that's just a recipe for disaster for OMG.
Yeah, Quacks, it's the recipe has been brewing right now. The disaster is in the oven and ready to be taken out as we're getting to the 21-minute mark right now. And what path forward do you see for these guys to make a play? I'd imagine it starts with Juhan landing an ultimate onto 1XN and missing, and OMG immediately blowing up missing before he can use his ultimate.
I feel like if your main target at this point is missing, something is definitely wrong, because you take out missing and all of the defensive tools that Lulu has. If he's not able to use them, then great, but chances are he'll probably be able to. If he is, you expend a lot of resources for Lulu, and then you got 4 other threats who are willing to just dive bomb onto you at that point. So I feel like it has to come from some type of a pick onto 1XM, maybe a pick onto Krako. If you can get, you know, one of these members of LNG, maybe you can go and try to flip Baron. That's kind of been the recipe for what most of these teams have been going for just worldwide. When you're super far behind, you find one pick, just go to the Baron at this point, because if you're trying to fight them on even playing fields, it's not going to end well for you.
I'm not sure what happened there. Trying to get a little too aggressive. Yeah, he's now down his flash, which is one of the major engage tools for OMG. And that's 40 seconds before this Dragon. I'd imagine this is likely to go to LNG without too much trouble, but OMG will certainly look to fight for it.
And at this point in time, you would say maybe OMG could look for some type of a cross map and maybe threaten this Baron. That's not a possibility, though. I mean, they don't have any control over this bot side river. You can see that Harry is moving up from bot lane, so they can at least fight for it for the time being.
Starry
but...
Okay.
Ooh, yeah,
he got tagged. Sheer was unable to flash toward him. As the crab is going to get taken out here. The Dragon now spawning as OMG desperately trying to get into this river, but LNG's defense is stout. OMG will now finally find their way in. His high chow on the backside, already down to half HP. OMG nice and grouped up. Orianna Shockwave not quite up, but should be soon. There's a knockup as they're just going to target out Harry to kick things off, and Harry's all out means that he is out. Big knockup from Juhan. This is OMG's chance. Over on the one Starry with red and white, but he's unable to take him down, and that means Sheer and the rest of LNG will be able to knock him down front to back and make it look easy. A triple kill for 1XN. That's going to be sold for LNG. And Sheer on the backside unable to finish off high chow.
I mean, the knockup from the Malphite looked good, Yanni, but it felt like it came too late. You had already lost a member of your team by the time you as Malphite went in, and the firepower from OMG is just not enough to deliver any killing blows of relevancy. LNG secure themselves the soul, they wipe the fight, and they maintain control of this game as we do get a replay. And honestly, I mean, that crab spots out high chow. There's no flank possible for the Akali, and this is your main backline threat, and he already gets taken down to half. Yanni, I feel like it is not off to a good start for OMG, but the big thing here is this. When they're going in, pay attention to 1XN on this Yunara and how cautious he's playing this spacing. He's super far away from the rest of his team to where OMG essentially have to choose between fighting all of LNG or trying to pick off the Yunara, and they try to go to fight all of LNG. They attempt to pivot, but it's too late. They're too split, and LNG close their jaws on that team fight.
Starry saw the vision, but the rest of OMG was unable to support him in that endeavor. Which is why 1XN escaped with such little HP. And now we have an 8,000 gold lead. It's Cloud Soul for LNG. I suppose the good news for OMG is if you can hang on for 4.5 more minutes, you could always try and flip the game at Elder.
And I feel like a lot of people will probably look at the Cloud Soul and be like, hey, that soul's the most useless. What year are you living in? First of all. Second of all, DPM did say that Cloud Soul technically has the highest win rate of any souls with like 90.2. So don't disrespect my boy Cloud.
Quacks, that's just because teams are so far ahead that they can just take them for free. Like what's going on right now.
I don't know, man.
Tell you that.
I think Cloud Soul's pretty broken. I
think Cloud Soul's good for certain champions, certain compositions even. Congo is just, bro. That's how far ahead LNG are right now.
Whoa!
Drag redirect with the Cataclysm. Say goodbye, Starry. With a teleport coming in, and immediately they're going to go attack Harry. He's going to all out Croco, but he's going to be unable to escape. Flash be damned. Harry will fall, and LNG with a 2-man advantage.
That was like a snake eyes play from Croco. You ever played Foursquare, Yanni, and you're looking to serve the ball to one part of the court, but then you like go to another direction that you're not looking at, and the person gets caught by surprise? I imagine Starry had a similar reaction. Bro just gets aggressed onto out of nowhere by Croco.
Yeah, they're just doing everything they can to keep Juhan away from that Baron. Moham even trying to get close, but to no avail. And that will be the Baron for LNG. Just under 27 minutes in this game, and 11,000 gold lead, Quacks.
Yeah. At this point, LNG, there's not a lot left to do, Yanni, except march down mid and start closing your grip onto this game. Flash over the wall. Starry, unfortunate, didn't have flash, honestly, even if he did have flash, I don't think it would have saved him. The Jarvan EQ combo is on such a short cooldown at this point that he would have easily been able to follow him wherever he went. He's in the trees, he's in the breeze, and LNG are getting closer and closer to the Nexus.
In the trees, in the breeze, breaking knees as the siege is on over on the bottom side here for LNG again. OMG, their only hope at this point is to hang on 2 more minutes and hope that LNG make a horrifying mistake around that Elder, but given the fact that they have go buttons whenever they want, I don't think that's going to happen, Quacks.
Yeah, it's really tough for OMG. I mean, now, when you've got a comp that goes fully forward...
Well, here goes Croco with that ultimate. He's going a little too deep, but I think it's all right as the rest of the team is there to finish this one off. 1xN ends up dying to Haichao, but Haichao will fall all the same, and that means all the damage for OMG is all gone. Under the Nexus turrets, they're going to put Harry in the dirt. All you can do is watch if you're Juhan, as LNG will finish this game off and take a 1-0 series lead.
Yeah, the best thing that Juhan can do at this point is hit him with the shuffle for Malphite, but he's just going to go down. LNG dominant game number 1 against the team that they have had 2 series against in Demacia Cup, beating them both times, and they are looking to make it a 3rd.
Wire to wire this game, Quacks. LNG were the better team. After that first fight in the bottom lane, that's when you knew, you know what, this is gonna be rough sledding. Every lane lost for the side of OMG, and when that happens, all of a sudden you'll look and be like, oh, we're only down 5 kills to 2. Oh, we're down 5,000 gold at 15 minutes. It was a very, very weird game in that sense. LNG just playing better.
Yeah, and I think a large majority of that stems from Croco. We can talk easily about the amount of pressure he put on the bot lane, constricting Starry from getting resources on the Cephalios, making it really difficult for him to transition into that late game threat that we all know the champion can be. But even the invisible things, like constantly shadowing Bulldog, which makes it very difficult for Haichao to get an early lead on the Akali, he was doing that on the Jarvan. So overall, his omnipresence around the bot side of the map, I think, is what really set up LNG to have those winning lanes and to take that snowball, roll it down the hill, and use it to run over OMG.
Remember, Quacks, in addition to player of the games, we got player of the series, and right now I think that Croco's certainly given himself a little bit of gas for either of those options.
I agree.
I think it's between him or 1xN. As the jungler, I'm sure you agree with Croco. As the AD carry player, I also agree with Croco. 1xN did a lot himself that game, but was also the beneficiary of a lot of plays that Croco started.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think that when 1xN actually, got the resources necessary to carry, he put them, as far forward as he possibly could. And that's all we're really asking from 1xN at this point. I mean, you got the resources, you helped carry the game toward the later stages when Jarvan kind of falls off in at least the damage department and is more so utilized for his utility and space making. But for 1xN as a player, we're looking at this guy now surrounded by some of these more veteran-esque players on LNG who all have a very common goal of redemption in mind going into this rebuild. When you've got these guys that surround you, you've got to be turning those performances that everybody saw when you were on Thunder Talk. You got to make those happen on LNG, and you got to turn the investors that believed in you in the 2025 year, and you got to make them rich in 2026. And I think that he was rich in that game, thanks to Kroko. He's making the investors rich as well, Yanni.
Oh, 1xN stonks going up, you know. Well, we'll see if that continues. Which, you know, OMG on the other side, I mean, they looked really disconnected in my opinion. I think that after that play that went awry in the bot lane, you never saw them link up again. I think Juhan picked the wrong place to focus. I think it should have been the mid lane, but after that it felt like they were very timid to make plays, and oftentimes we saw Juhan ulting away.
Yeah, I feel like this is just a game where you put it pretty eloquently earlier, Yanni. OMG just didn't always need to fight. They didn't need to be scrapping for every modicum of gold experience, but they did. And by the time they kind of realized, hey, we shouldn't be fighting for this, it was too late. You weren't really in control of that game when you realized that. And I do think that if OMG had been, you know, more willing to look for cross map plays, have been more willing to try and go for a different angle and set up some of these other aspects of the game, they could have made game number one at least a little bit more competitive, if nothing else. But they kept going for fights even when they were behind. I think Juhan took the fight part of Malfight a little too literally. Sometimes you got to be Mal-run.
Did you see some of those kill participation numbers? I mean,
Yes.
you know, we had Kroko at what, 96 or 94%, one or the other. Then we had missing at 100%. Honestly, really, really beautiful stuff from those guys coming out here. All right, so we got to talk about something. We got to talk about supporting the LPL English project, because you know that you want to support the LPL English project, because really, we're just that good. Instead of donating money to the sportsbook for all the bettors out there, you could be donating money to us. Ko-Fi Coffee is the best way to support the LPL English project. A vast majority of our contributions go directly to the show. A lot of the initial payments go to upgrading the broadcast, but a large bulk of it pays on-air talent and content creators like myself and Quacks. If you subscribe to the coffee, that'll be linked in the chat. You can unlock perks like early access to content and the ability to ask interview questions for our unique on-site interviews. With that, we're going to go ahead and take our first break of the night, and when we return, we'll be back with Game 2 between OMG and LNG. We'll see you there.